Hello, and welcome to the Pecha Kucha on storytelling. Although many games have different aspects to them, including multiplayer modes and side missions, the campaign and story behind it are the most integral in the game. Without the story, there is no way to introduce the player to the game and characters that they are playing. This Pecha Kucha will explain just what makes a good story for games as well as all other media. The creation of a story can often be the hardest thing to do. Many designers center a game around a mechanic, but find it hard to create a world around it. The few who are able to discover that world usually start with a core character, race, or species that give them inspiration. It is very rare to find someone who suddenly imagined an entire universe based on a single thought. The function of any story is to create a world that the player would be interested in, so it is paramount to keep the player in mind in order to allow them to relate to the story and the characters easier. If a player is confused about the main plot in a story, it is up to the creator of the story to explain it to the player. The creator should never lose track of the function of the story, or they may create many different stories instead. Structure is key to any story, for it gives the creator a better understanding of what the story is. The main components to the structure are setting, characters, and events. Once a creator has this in mind, a story can be written about anything that they desire. But it is crucial to stay within this structure, or a story may become confusing or lose its flow. Setting is very important because it can be hard to explain that it is a science fiction story when it happens in Germany in 1942. The setting is not simply about where and when a story takes place, but also how the story is experienced by the player. If you create a game like Assassin's Creed where you travel back in time to kill people from history, it can get confusing if one of the targets is still living in real life today. Another key component to structure is the characters. A character cannot be faceless, but must be able to experience what is happening in the story. You cannot put that everyone is attending a funeral and one character is dressed as a clown jumping around, or this creates a sense that the character does not fit in the story as well as they should. Events are the driving force behind any plot in a story. When an event happens, it is often out of the hands of the characters. Examples of events include hurricanes, unavoidable deaths, and other things that change some aspect of the story. Events can be the most useful tools because many creators use them to get the story back on track if it is not moving fast enough. The flow is another key aspect of any story. Without flow, there is no plot. Someone cannot just create a story where the character gets hit by event after event, because this causes whiplash to the player, as they cannot keep up with what is happening. On the other hand, flow can be disrupted if the story seems predictable and the players find it to be boring. Localization is when the place and characters match the time. A key example of bad localization is when people in 11 AD use advanced weaponry to fight each other. This creates an unrealistic scenario for the player and they will become confused. A basis can be established like in the game Assassin's Creed, where the computer you're strapped into in the game is translating the language even though you are in Arabia. Action is the key to keeping any player hooked. It does not have to be an explosion-filled as a Michael Bay film, but simply having something like in Fight Club where they are fighting in the basement is enough to let the player feel like there is something happening. The build-up to an action scene does not have to be long, but keep in mind not to include too much action, or the story might get lost in the rubble of the last fight. Emotion may seem unnecessary in a story because it is crying and sadness, but emotions can range from anger to sadness to feelings of success and accomplishment. In many games, the characters often seem emotionless, like Marcus Phoenix from Gears of War, but many times there are different ways to express those emotions. Interactions between characters are a necessity in any story, because the characters are not solely on their own. Even when facing enemies, often the interactions can vary greatly. In Halo 2, Master Chief and the Arbiter start as enemies, but when faced with the destruction of both their races, they work together. From cursing each other at their first meeting to becoming allies, it was their interaction that saved the galaxy. Any story should be entertaining for the player. The number of ways that you can go about this varies on how you want the player to feel. If you want the player to feel sad and then surprised as their favorite character dies and then is resurrected, there are ways to go about that. Stories should be catering to the player and give them a feeling like they never want to put the controller down and want to pick it up after 10 years. If you create a story, always keep in mind originality. There are too many games that are derived from the same formula like the Call of Duty games. Although modern shooters are fun, the stories can often get stale when the antagonist with a bomb plot slowly becomes the norm. Never make a game just because you wanted to make another modern shooter with the same plot. Also, try to avoid tropes, which are rhetorical media references. Classic examples include the scene in Star Wars where Darth Vader says, "No, I am your father." This not only wears out the joke, but it creates a sense that the creator of the story is unable to come up with their own jokes or twists. There is always an original idea that can drive the story and create your own world. Although you may find Weird Al's songs hilarious, parodies are a dying art form. Good as a joke and polite conversation, using a parody as a story can make the players of your game feel like the game is obsessed with whatever it is parodying. It can often be funny to tell a joke through story, but there is a rare chance that the player will want to play it after experiencing the joke the first time. Completion is the hardest thing besides starting a story. Unless the creator knows exactly when to stop creating their world, they may not know how to finish it. If you plan to create a whole series, how will you know when to stop? The world you created will live on despite you not writing about it, so I suggest only including the information that the player needs. Prequels and sequels are not the most evil thing on this planet. Yes, many of them are tasteless, and besides including the characters from the original, they can feel unlike the world before it. But they are not evil in any way. Take for example Lord of the Rings series. When Tolkien first wrote it, he had the idea for the trilogy we know, but then decided to create a backstory with the Silmarillion. Spin-offs are also similar in this respect. When the Star Wars series was created, it created a new and exciting universe to explore. Since then, many different novels and games have spawned to round out the universe. The idea was not to besmirch George Lucas, but to show how much of an inspiration his characters are and how in-depth his universe really is. Miniseries are similar to spin-offs, except that they take place in between events. In the Halo universe, there were events that took place between the Spartan training and protecting the colony of Reach that were undiscussed. The miniseries known as Forward Unto Dawn enlightened fans of the story with details of what transpired and helps give backstory to other characters in the series.